Hello friends, and welcome to my review for Monster Hunter Sunbreak. First, I'd like to give my general thoughts on the expansion in a non-spoiler fashion, but for the remainder of the video I will go into detail of all the new stuff we were given. With that being said, here are my general thoughts. This expansion was pretty awesome, for the most part. The game has a ton of new ways to play and keeps the experience growing with the addition of new switch skills, 3 new locales if you include the final boss room, and a handful of both new and returning monsters. Overall, I enjoyed my time with Sunbreak, and I'll continue to play it through the content updates we'll receive this year and next. With the content that we did receive, it felt like a perfect progression from the Rise formula, but the amount of content is ultimately the biggest downfall of Sunbreak. I can't say much more without dipping my toes into spoilers, so if that's something that you do not want to hear, I recommend not watching the rest of the video. Thank you for watching, and if you stick around, enjoy the rest of the video. Alright, let's get into arguably the best part of a new Monster Hunter expansion. I'll walk you through every new monster we got, including subspecies and the anomaly monsters. I'll be giving a rating out of 10 for each monster on this list and expressing my opinion on the level of fun I had fighting them and how much I enjoy their overall design. First up, we have the Blood Orange Bishaten. I enjoyed the Bishaten in Monster Hunter Rise, but I think this subspecies is even more enjoyable. The Blast Pinecone gimmick is a ton of fun, and the monster still has its over-the-top abilities that give it so much character. I didn't find the monster too difficult, but compared to normal Bishaten, it's a decent upgrade. The monster will throw exploding pine cones instead of rotten fruit, and the trajectory of these pine cones have been altered to throw you off. They also gave this Bishaten a Fire Breath move that's pretty cool. I have a set using its sword and shield, and the design looks absolutely sick. No complaints from me. Solid 7 out of 10 for this guy. Next up, we have the Aurora Somnicanth. Just like its predecessor, this ice variation is one that I found less enjoyable the more and more I fought it. The Somnicanth's animations feel unpredictable to me, and I always find myself getting hit by the stupidest things. Of course, once you get into Master Rank, most attacks from monsters do half of your HP anyway, making me play overly patient and resulting in a lengthy hunt. The only new attack that I thought deserved a mention was this circling move that has a really cool finish to it. Other than that, I can't help but get annoyed just by looking at this monster. This one gets a 5 out of 10. Very cool visual design, but frustrating to hunt. On to the Magma Almudron. The Almudron was one of my most anticipated monsters when I saw it in a trailer for Monster Hunter Rise. Using mud to create pillars and keep you stuck in place, it felt like a more challenging version of the Barroth fight. Unorthodox animations and attacks that reminded me of a monster we haven't seen since Monster Hunter Generations. Oh yes, the Najarala. Such a great design for a monster. The Magma Almudron again feels like a great progression from its predecessor and has enough new moves to keep the fight interesting. I'm also incredibly impressed by the visual design of this monster, and for those reasons, he gets an 8 out of 10. And now for the last subspecies introduced in Sunbreak, Pyrorachna Kadaki. This is my least favorite of the returning monsters by a long shot. It's unfortunate that this monster had the same treatment as its predecessor, and that is, it's just way too easy. I don't know what it is about these spiders, but they always leave me in a saddened state. Maybe it's because I was much younger, but Nursilla from Monster Hunter 4 required my constant attention. Nursilla was a much faster monster, and it had the ability to go above or below floors of webs, creating attacks that were nearly hidden from the player until the last moment. In this case, Pyrorachna has a few additional moves from original Rachna, but did not deliver the challenge I was hoping for. The design of this monster is so unique, especially Pyrorachna, but other than presentation, this is just another autopilot monster. Pyrorachna Kadaki gets a 4 out of 10, and I hope that Capcom will create a more challenging spider monster in the future. For this next section, I'd like to briefly talk about returning monsters. We've seen all of these monsters before and know how they function, so I don't feel like I need to spend too much time on each individual entry. I'll just give a quick couple words on each monster and how I would rate them out of 10. Daimo and Sianitar are a duo that I find perfectly average. I think because of the limited movement options in previous games, constantly getting knocked down by what felt like inescapable claw attacks became an incredibly frustrating experience. But with the added movement options and wire bug mechanics, these fights are easy and enjoyable. 7 out of 10. Astalos is back and shinier than ever, a monster that feels just as chaotic and explosive as before. I absolutely love this monster's design, and all the weapons are some of my favorites. 8 out of 10. Seregios, on the other hand, is a problem. Another monster that I feel is the epitome of frustration. Having a bleed status effect is fine, but when every little needle and talon swipe knocks you down or pushes you away, the fight becomes a potion drinking simulator. 6 out of 10. Crimson Glow Valstrax. Incredible design, ridiculously flashy moves, and hands down one of the best monster themes I've ever heard. Even though he was in Rise, his post-game addition in Sunbreak was a welcome treat. 8 out of 10. And finally, we have Gore and Shigaru Magala. I would argue this is still the best gimmick on any monster we've had in the entire series. With the Frenzy status effect, these monsters create an environment where being aggressive is the only way to effectively win the battle. Both monsters have awesome movesets, and their weapon and armor designs have to be a top 5 pick for me. Gore Magala gets an 8 out of 10, and Shigaru gets a 9 out of 10. Okay, next up are the new monsters exclusive to Sunbreak. We got 4 brand new monsters, as well as a monster that originally came from Monster Hunter Frontier. That monster is Frontier's Season 2 flagship, Espinas. Espinas is a highly aggressive flying wyvern that is covered from head to tail in poisonous spikes. Not only does Espinas inflict poison to the player through physical attacks, if you manage to get hit by one of Espinas' fireballs, you will be inflicted with Fire Blight, poison, and paralysis, leaving you vulnerable to a follow-up charge attack or tail slam from the monster. If I had to compare this monster to others in some way, I would say it feels like Diablos and Tigrex merged together. Charge attacks, tail slams, fireballs, and horn swipes make up most of Espinas' moveset. As far as difficulty, I didn't find this monster overly challenging, but not too easy either. Espinas is faster than most, and compared to other wyverns has some unorthodox animations that you have to look out for. My biggest concern for Espinas was that it would have the fireball spam of Rathalos and a dash of paralysis to go with it. Luckily, this monster's fireball attacks have somewhat slow animations, and most of the time I can react to them. A greatly appreciated wyvern that I'd love to see again. 8 out of 10. On a side note, I would like to recognize that fans have been asking for additions from Monster Hunter Frontier for years now, and finally it seems that Capcom has listened. As someone who had very little exposure to Frontier, it makes me ecstatic to know the possibility of additions we could receive in the future. For other fans, they are returning monsters, but for me they are all brand new. I cannot complain about that. Next up are the 3 Lords of Sunbreak. Let's start with everyone's favorite dual-element gorilla, Garen Gollum. Only angered when its peace is disturbed, you do not want to step on this monster's toes. Garen Gollum is a fanged beast equipped with the power of both fire and water. In this monster's normal stance, I feel that the fight can be quite underwhelming. Not much variety as far as attacks go. When Garen Gollum is enraged, however, the fight becomes a lot more engaging. When enraged, Garen Gollum utilizes each fist as the holder of either fire or water, and combos them together for high damage attacks. My personal favorite of these attacks is when Garen Gollum uses its fire fist to catapult itself into the air, rocketing toward the player and creating a large follow-up with its water fist. Other than the creative visual design, challenge is pretty standard here. This monster's fists are very large, taking only 5 less damage than its head, making it incredibly easy to exploit these weak spots. Most attacks from Garen Gollum are slow and telegraphed heavily, so it is not difficult to abuse wire bugs in this fight. Garen Gollum gets a 7 out of 10. Can't emphasize how much I love the design, but the challenge wasn't there for me. Let's talk about the Zinogre's long-lost brother, Lunagaron. Lunagaron is a fanged wyvern that coats itself in ice, similar to how the Zinogre charges itself with electricity. Visually, this monster is pretty standard. Not a bad design by any means, but one that I felt didn't stand out among the rest, making it my least favorite of the 3 lords. Fighting Lunagaron, on the other hand, is a blast. Similar to Garen Gollum, the normal stance of this monster isn't too much of a threat, but when enraged, attacks become even faster and lots of new options open up. Lunagaren's ground swipe, hind leg kick, and furious slash combo are interesting moves, but I especially love Lunagaren's leaping double slash. I'll be giving Lunagaren a 7 out of 10. Time to talk about the flagship monster of Sunbreak, the vampire dragon Malzeno. This elder dragon is just so cool. The visual design, moveset, weapons, armor, and the new Blood Blight mechanic are all refreshing and welcomed with open arms. Visually, this monster is difficult for me to compare to anything else, but the closest thing it shares to another monster is a similar body and build to Velkhana, but that's about it. As far as movesets go, this monster has it all. Lunging bite attacks, tail swipes, projectile blood orbs, belly slams, wind blasts, teleportation, and a vampiric grab attack. My favorite of these has to be the tail slam into stab combo. Visually, this move is so cool and I get giddy every time I see it on screen. Attacks from Malzeno feel decently fast, and I would say out of the other two lords, Malzeno brings the most challenge to the table. Blood Blight is also another incredible gimmick that I've been waiting to see in Monster Hunter for a long time. Essentially, natural healing and healing items are greatly reduced, but in return you gain the ability to lifesteal with your damage output. When you've taken damage and the blight is applied, whatever damage you apply back to the monster will heal you for a small portion of HP. Similar to Gore and Shigaru Magala, this creates an environment where aggression from the player is strongly encouraged, introducing a far more interesting and fast-paced hunt. A 9 out of 10 for Malzeno and a chef's kiss to the developers at Capcom who came up with this design. I'd like to warn the viewers for the next section of this video. I'm about to cover the last boss in Sunbreak and all the monsters that are introduced in post-game content. If you do not want these monsters spoiled for you, please skip ahead to the timestamp at the bottom of the screen. I'll give you a second. Good? Okay. Monster Hunter Sunbreak's final boss is Geismagorm. This elder dragon finds its home in the Yawning Abyss, waiting for Curio to return back to it. Starting with visual design, Geismagorm strongly resembles the Acantor, sharing identical body types. From the front legs to the tail, this monster seems like Capcom's love letter to the old monster. As far as last bosses are concerned, Shara Ishvalda from Iceborne and Atal Ka from Generations Ultimate have designs that push the boundaries for the series. Geismagorm, on the other hand, feels like a monster we've had prior, but with a new paint job. This isn't a complete jab at the design. I do like it, but I feel like we deserved more as far as visuals go. Now for the moveset. Most attacks from this monster are stunning. Curio explosions, tail sweeps, tempered stomps, groundbreaking lasers, and much more. Of these moves, my favorite has to be this tempered stomp. This animation just looks so funny to me. I have 3 highlights of the hunt that definitely wowed me. First is the ballista section. Essentially, Geismagorm climbs the side of this cliff, and you have to shoot the monster down with ballista guns, aiming for these clumps of Curio on its back. If you do not destroy all 3, the monster will finish you off with this angelic finisher. Not too threatening if you run away as the attack begins, but this animation dropped my jaw to the floor. Second is this creative dash attack the monster does in Phase 3. Not a complex attack by any means, but certainly flashy. Finally, I enjoyed Geismagorm's final phase quite a bit. The red tinge covering the screen and the flames shooting out of its body, this is where I found the monster the most threatening. All attacks from this monster have explosive follow-ups, and there are a few additional moves to look out for in this phase. I'm giving Geismagorm a 7 out of 10. I can't say I was floored compared to prior final bosses in the series, but I'm perfectly content with what we got. Let's finish part 1 of this review discussing Sunbreak's post-game content. Once Geismagorm is defeated, the player's master rank becomes unlocked. Every 10 or so levels, a new urgent quest is required to rank up further, up to Master Rank 100. At Master Rank 10, you unlock Afflicted Azuros. At 20 and 30, Ibushi and Narwa are available. 50 unlocks Furious Rajang, 70 Valstrax, and finally at Master Rank 100, the urgent quest for Scorn Magnamalo is available. I don't feel the need to discuss Ibushi, Narwa, or Valstrax, as they are monsters we've seen in Rise, but scaled up for Master Rank. With that, let's get into the rest. For Afflicted monsters, I'll be using the example of Afflicted Azuros, but my opinion on this specific fight really speaks for my opinion on Afflicted monsters as a whole. How do I say this in the nicest way possible? I wish Afflicted Azuros would go out for cigarettes and never come home. I wish every time Afflicted Azuros ate at a restaurant, the cooks would spit in its food. And most of all, I wish Afflicted Azuros' car would break down in the Mojave Desert and it would be stuck in 118-degree weather for days. Okay, maybe that last one was a bit harsh, but you get the idea. I strongly dislike these monsters, and here's why. First, and certainly most egregious, is that afflicted monsters have too much health. Monsters that would usually take 15 minutes to hunt in Master Rank can have an additional 15 tacked onto them just based on bloated health pools. This makes hunting these monsters drastically less enjoyable. You're not learning and adapting to a new moveset or challenge. Instead, you're given the illusion of challenge by increasing time committed to each hunt. Bloated health bars feel like an excuse for lack of creativity, or most likely, rushed deadlines that the developers couldn't keep up with. Hopefully Capcom will correct this in future titles. My second reason for disliking afflicted monsters ties directly into the first. Rewards for anomaly quests are too scarce for the amount of time each quest takes. There are a total of 8 different anomaly materials. Each individual weapon requires 7 of one of these materials in order to upgrade it to rarity 10. 7 doesn't seem like that many, but when you can receive as little as 2 materials for each quest, it can be incredibly disheartening when you don't receive adequate rewards. On top of that, there are some weapons that require multiple afflicted materials for one weapon upgrade. Look at the antique Machina gun lance for example. This gun lance requires at least 7 hunts to meet the requirements, and that's assuming you receive 3 of each material for every hunt you complete. The type of grind that afflicted materials require is why people have a negative association with the word. My final gripe with the afflicted monsters is that they are no different in terms of moveset from their originals. When fighting afflicted monsters, the goal is to burst these small sections of curio buildup on the monsters. If you succeed, the monster is knocked down and exhausted for a short period of time. But if you fail, the monster explodes and giant orbs of curio swarm around it for a few seconds. That's it. That's the whole gimmick. Rinse and repeat for 30 minutes. Afflicted Monsters was a fascinating idea because it worked directly into the story of the game, but when it came to gameplay, the idea failed to bring a meaningful challenge. To end this point, I want to make a full disclaimer for some viewers. Challenge is a heavily subjective topic, so this view of challenge I just shared is exclusively from my experience and preference. Obviously this whole review is subjective, but I want to reiterate that point when I'm negatively talking about something. If you love afflicted monsters and all of the mechanics that come with it, that is perfectly okay. The last thing I want to do is take away from anyone's experience of the game or make someone feel bad for having fun. Next up we have Furious Rajang. This variant of Rajang has yellow fur covering its body and is torn off its tail to fully harness its power. If you've played Furious Rajang from Monster Hunter World, then the Sunbreak version won't surprise you. If you have not fought Furious Rajang in previous titles, let me fill you in. Furious Rajang is essentially the same monster but with a few new attacks. A dash attack that is crazy fast, a few lightning projectiles, a shockwave that pulses electricity through the ground, and the classic boulder throw. I've always been a massive fan of Rajang, but this version of Furious Rajang is probably the most underwhelming yet. I can't quite pin down why, but most of these new attacks don't feel threatening to me, and the fight feels about the same as normal Rajang in terms of challenge. I'll be giving Furious Rajang a 7 out of 10. New animations are stylish, and the abilities introduced are fun to play around with, but they don't challenge the player a whole lot. Okay. It's about time that we bring up the true final monster in the Sunbreak expansion, Scorned Magnamalo. This variant works exactly the same way as Furious Rajang. A few new moves and a power increase across the board. New attacks include a double tail slam, an explosive dash, and a few enhanced attacks from its previous form. My favorite of these has to be this new Wave of Hellfire move. The animation and sound design on this ability impressed me immensely. I will say that in terms of how creative this monster feels from its predecessor, it's definitely a better split than Rajang. But I could also feel that way because Scorned Magnamalo is fresh, and I've not had the chance to hunt it nearly as many times as Furious Rajang. I'm giving Scorned Magnamalo an 8 out of 10. Normal Magnamalo was such a remarkably well-designed flagship that this variant feels like the icing on the cake. Now that we've covered all the monsters included in Sunbreak, let's move on to the world that the player resides in. The Elgato Outpost is exactly the kind of place I wanted to progress to when it came to player hubs. In Monster Hunter Rise, we resided in Kimura Village, a small town that relies on our protection in a hometown hero sort of way. The quaint nature of this hub created an intimate experience. It felt good knowing that you were helping this village on an individual level. Each villager had its own tasks they needed assistance with, and you were the only one capable of completing said task. Elgato is the perfect transition from Kimura. You've moved on from a small-time hunter and evolved into someone who can handle tasks on a grander scale. In terms of gameplay, these tasks and quests haven't changed much, but narratively you feel the switch. In Elgato, you find yourself surrounded by hunters that are respected in their craft and are all working towards a collective goal. The hustle and bustle of the hunters' daily lives leaves the player with a blanket of comfort. The feeling of stepping into Elgato was the same one I got when introduced to LAKEY in Monster Hunter Tri. The feeling that you're important enough to be here and this community values you as much as anyone else. Not only does this progression work for both games narratively, it gives two entirely different experiences in terms of atmosphere. I think most Monster Hunter games have done this very well in the past, but Elgato and LAKEY are my personal favorites. Elgato departs from the Japanese theme as well, introducing a more European Castle Age aesthetic. I loved Kimura's theme and design, but it's refreshing to feel like we really did travel on a ship to another place, living among a whole nother culture. To add to a previous point, the Elgato Outpost is quite literally designed for the purpose of researching monsters. Instead of being invaded by rampages and having to protect Kimura from threats of monsters, Elgato is a place for adventurers and explorers alike, paving the way for the society you are a part of. There are two more aspects that I feel complete Elgato's design. First is the music. Elgato's theme is one that I find myself humming constantly. I can think of very few times when Capcom fails in the music department, and this is definitely not one of those times. This theme makes me feel cozy and welcomed, as if I was sitting on a European countryside wasting the day away. Second are the characters you interact with in Elgato. I'm not speaking on characters from a narrative standpoint because frankly I never cared too much for the overall story of a Monster Hunter game, but as far as each character's personality, I enjoyed all of them thoroughly. The temperament of each character is diverse enough to where I never find myself forgetting them, and I love the way they bounce off each other's personalities. Let's move on to the two new locales the player must traverse in Sunbreak. First, we have the returning jungle locale that originates from Monster Hunter 2 DOS. This locale was reintroduced in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, but it's nice to see it again with updated textures and merged zones. To no one's surprise, Capcom did a great job recreating nostalgia for fans of old titles, but on top of that they always seem to inject that nostalgia into something that is new altogether. I was pleased to discover that the jungle locale is not just a copy and paste from its older version, but instead it's adapted to the mechanics and aesthetic of modern Monster Hunter games. Following the trend of other returning maps like the Flooded Forest, the jungle offers a ton in terms of exploration. From high cliffs to deep cave systems, the locale breathes life in every corner. Another welcome addition to the jungle locale are all of the secrets you can discover while exploring. These secrets are an incentive for players to slow down and take in the world. Monster Hunter over time has evolved from a game that focuses on all aspects of the hunt to a more streamlined experience focusing primarily on combat. Regardless of your preference, I believe the locales in Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak merge both old and new styles of hunting together. On top of that, I believe that these locales fixed a ton of the issues I had with World and Iceborne's locales. I understand the intention was to push a more realistic next-gen experience for Monster Hunter, but the core reason why I found this series fun in the first place was difficult to obtain in these titles. Heavy foliage and confusing map design made these locales incredibly frustrating to traverse. Rise and Sunbreak once again merge both old and new designs flawlessly. There are plenty of places for the player to discover and get lost in, but when it comes to combat, the player is no longer confined by external sources. There are still a few times when I find myself frustrated by the narrowness of zones, but these moments are far fewer than before. The second locale shown off in Monster Hunter Sunbreak is the Citadel. The Citadel is made up of 3 subzones. Each subzone represents a different Lord of Sunbreak. The Muddy Swamp is home to Garen Gollum, the Icy Peaks Luna Garen, and the Fallen Castle Malzeno. Following the same pattern as the jungle, this locale has many secrets and fun things to discover. I love every inch of detail the developers added to make this locale full of life. On the other end, let me voice my issues with the Citadel. I feel as if Capcom hit a wall in terms of variety with this new locale. With Rise and Sunbreak, we have explored all of the same biomes we've been exploring since the beginning of the series. A forest, jungle, desert, volcano, and frozen tundra make up the majority of these locales. Though these locales are improved and updated with each game, I feel that Monster Hunter World and Iceborne actually brought the most unique biomes we've seen so far. The Rotten Vale and Coral Highlands both introduced a new twist on biomes we've seen previously, and I wish Capcom would have pushed these kinds of ideas further for Sunbreak. Even World's dedicated volcano map, Elder's Recess, had all kinds of unique elements to it that we haven't seen since. In terms of depth and content, Capcom always scores, but they are beginning to repeat themselves in terms of variety and uniqueness. Overall, these new locales were enjoyable to explore and hunt within, but in the future, I hope that Capcom begins to push the boundaries of locale variation like they did in World and Iceborne. For the final part of this video, let's discuss the new or changed mechanics in Sunbreak. First up is the new ability to swap switch skill loadouts. In base Rise, the player was able to customize their playstyle by alternating 5 different aspects of their weapon of choice. These can be as small as one-button combos to integral switch skills that completely flip the weapon's playstyle or strategy. In Sunbreak, we are now given the opportunity to swap between 2 separate loadouts of these switch skills. Each loadout is dedicated to either the red scroll or blue scroll. I believe that this mechanic was introduced to give the player an outlet for trying out niche switch skills that you wouldn't use often, while enjoying your main playstyle alongside it. On top of swapping between a red and blue scroll of skills, we were also given a new skill swap evade to go with it. When swapping between a scroll, press the dodge button immediately after to perform this evade. Not only is this evade useful for dodging monster attacks, but it will unsheath your weapon as well, creating powerful follow-up potential. In addition to those new mechanics, the player was given a total of 3 additional switch skills per weapon. For the sake of time, I'll only be showing off my personal top 3 of these new switch skills, in no particular order. I'll also mention that I play Sunbreak on the Nintendo Switch, so all of the controls I refer to will apply to the Switch's button layout. First we have the Surge / combo for the Greatsword. This new switch skill replaces the Greatsword's charge slash with a heavy-hitting 3/ combo. Tapping X, A, or X and A together will give the player 3 separate options for attacks. All of these attacks may be mixed into each other for a total of 3 hits. Once the 3-hit combo is completed, the player follows up with a strong charge slash into true charge slash. This switch skill allows for a much faster paced Greatsword experience. All 3 buttons are powerful in different situations, making this playstyle creative to mess around with. Next up is the Strong Arm stance for the Greatsword. This switch skill allows for the player to counter the monster when hit by an incoming attack. If the Greatsword is unsheathed when the player uses this switch skill, the Greatsword will follow up with a fully powered level 1 charge attack. But here's where this skill becomes insane. If the player is charging a level 1 or level 2 slash and the switch skill is activated, the Greatsword will go straight into a fully powered true charge slash. This combo creates devastating damage for monsters with slow movement options. On top of that, this skill may also be activated by the use of a small barrel bomb. Simply place the bomb, begin charging, and immediately use Strong Arm stance to follow up with a true charge slash. This switch skill may also be used to skip to the third hit in the surge/combo, but I don't find the damage nearly as effective. Last but not least is the shield bash switch skill for the sword and shield. This switch skill is about as simple as it gets, but man is it satisfying to pull off. When the player activates the skill, they will quickly dash to a desired location. The end of this attack is followed up by a shield bash that has incredible potential to stun monsters. Not only does this switch skill create satisfying KO scenarios, but it is also an excellent tool for getting in and out of danger fast. Moving on, let's discuss the new endemic life that assists the player in hunting monsters. All of these creatures are simple in nature, but affect the hunt in various ways. First are the new Starburst bugs. While wyvern riding, ram the monster into these bugs to apply heavy damage and status effects onto the monster. Second are spear squids. Lure a monster on top of these jumping squids to flinch the monster and keep it stationary for a few seconds. This gives the player small opportunities to apply powerful damage on the monster for free. Third, we have the slicer crab. Similar to spear squids, these creatures attack when their territory is invaded. If the player topples a monster near these crabs, they will deal high damage for a period of time. Fourth are the morphed wire bugs. The ruby wire bug applies more damage to monster attacks when wyvern riding. The gold wire bug increases the amount of material drops when using wyvern riding attacks. Fifth is the thorny toad. This acidic toad leaps onto the monster, flinching or toppling the monster for a short duration. The player is not able to pick up these endemic life, so the trick is to fight the monster in the swamp of the citadel, where these toads reside. I couldn't quite figure out how to get these toads to attack, so this is an interaction I still have not seen. The sixth and final endemic life added to Sunbreak is the marionette spider. This spider is thrown out by the player, tethering to the monster. When reactivated, the monster is pulled in whatever direction the player is standing. When next to a wall, the monster will collide with the wall and topple for a few moments. If the monster is airborne, the tether will pull the monster from the sky into a toppled state. All of the endemic life previously mentioned are useful tools to bring more variety to the hunt. The marionette spider is the most satisfying and rewarding in my opinion. Finally, we have the two mechanics that had quality of life changes with this expansion. Wyvern riding may now be disabled if the player does not wish to do so. Unfortunately, the amount of time monsters stay in their rideable state is greatly reduced if this option is disabled. Capcom probably made this change because of how much damage the player is able to output in just a few seconds. The second quality of life change is that the player can now run up walls without the use of a wire bug. Small changes like this are greatly appreciated, so salute to Capcom for this welcomed adjustment. Let's briefly recap part 1 through 3 of this video and my overall thoughts on each topic. Starting with monsters, I would say that I was pleased overall with the entries included in this expansion. My biggest gripe with the monsters are the subspecies and anomaly monsters. 2 of the 4 subspecies felt completely unnecessary to me, and all of them lacked a substantial difficulty spike. Anomaly monsters shared the same issue, but tenfold. I can't think of an excuse for why these monsters are so flat other than the developers not having proper time to flesh out the concept. To me, both the subspecies and anomaly monsters felt like missed potential. On the other hand, new and returning monsters were the real stars of this expansion. Returning monsters were adapted incredibly well into this game in terms of both gameplay and visuals. As far as new monsters, I felt that all 3 Lords of Sunbreak were imaginative and distinct from one another. I really hope we see subspecies or variants of them in future updates. Sunbreak's world is an aspect of this game that also left me slightly disappointed. The Elgato Outpost is a nearly perfect hub in my eyes, but other than that I don't have much more praise to give. The 2 locales introduced within Sunbreak are about as average as it gets. Nothing overly exciting, but nothing terrible either. I only dream that Capcom comes up with new locale designs because these repeated locales are becoming stale very quick. As far as mechanics are concerned, I think Sunbreak did an excellent job expanding on Rise's concepts in every way. The new switch skills introduced are innovative and flashy, and none of them feel like repeats of previous skills. Endemic life feels like a staple of this series at this point, and I hope that Capcom continues to include them for many games to come. Every creature has a unique purpose and adds to each locale's ecosystem, making the world more believable. Monster Hunter Sunbreak is an upgrade in almost every way from its predecessor. If you enjoyed Rise, you will surely enjoy Sunbreak as well. I'll be giving this expansion a 7 out of 10. Hey, thanks for watching my review of Monster Hunter Sunbreak. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Let me know what you thought of the expansion and what you hope to see in upcoming free title updates. While recording the last third of this video, the first title update has already been released. I plan on creating small reviews for each update, so keep an eye out for those. Other than that, thank you for watching and have a great day.